So last night I subjected myself to the movie Hiroshima Mon Amour, aka Hiroshima My Love, or in Japanese, Nijiokan no Joji, the 24-hour love affair. I rented it from Criterion Collection whilst wanting to seek out a random Japanese movie, and the box cover was literally a map of Hiroshima, and somehow that spoke to me. Now, before I get into this movie as a whole, I'm going to say that this movie, oddly and very weirdly, completes the trilogy that starts in Oppenheimer, climaxes in Godzilla -1. I mean, technically, you could just argue that this movie is a sequel to Oppenheimer, and I guess if you really hate Godzilla, you can have it that way, but I like Godzilla, and everyone's already claimed that Oppenheimer's true sequel is Godzilla -1, so fuck it. This is a trilogy now. Oppenheimer, Godzilla -1, Hiroshima Mon Amour. Somehow, put them all together and you have a perfect trilogy, all with one common theme, that World War II ended and there were no winners. So quick spoilers for 1959's Hiroshima Mon Amour, if you didn't watch it the first time it played in 1959. Hiroshima Mon Amour is a strange and almost fantastical story of a French woman played by Emmanuelle Riva, who upon hearing about the end of World War II and the bombing of Hiroshima, is overcome with a profound sense of guilt at the human tragedy of Hiroshima, and so, as she goes on to state that she is a proud, sexually liberated French woman of the early 1960s who is best in the world at doing sex, she decides to go on vacation to Japan, where she works as a nurse for the Hiroshima nuclear survivors, and at night she is a very generous lover. I don't really know how to sum that up more politely than that, but she is so overwhelmed with the grief of the Hiroshima incident that she decided to literally travel to Japan to offer herself up as a consolation prize to any lonely, sad Japanese man that would have her. And so she becomes engaged in a tantric, exotic international love affair with a fairly handsome Japanese man played by Eiji Okada. And as she makes love with him, she talks to herself for about 2 hours trying to make sense of what the hell she's doing with her life. Now, I'm not sure if I'm fully capable of understanding the motivations of this woman, since I am not a woman, and also this is from a different time period, but anyway, this was a pretty influential piece of media, even though I've never seen it before or heard of it before tonight. The film starts with this 20-minute monologue of who this woman is. She pretty much just talks to herself for 20 minutes about her personal identity, her prowess and ability at sex, how great she is at sex, and how sex is the most powerful guiding force in her life. Now, oddly enough, even though I've never seen this movie before, I've seen this before. I recognize this because this was in the anime Lupin III, The Woman Called Fujiko Mine. That series almost starts exactly the way this movie does, except it somehow managed to compress this entire monologue into a 2-minute opening sequence, and that was freaking cool as hell. But oddly enough, it has the exact same rhythm as the opening sequence. The opening sequence gets to the point a hell of a lot faster, but nonetheless, because it had the same rhythm and because it had the same style, I recognized it. I have a really fond memory of that opening, so I totally could see that this is the original inspiration for that. Just way, way longer. By the way, I also need to point out that this movie is one of the few movies I've seen that has a rhythm to it. A very bizarre rhythm to it. Oh, and for the record, the only other movie I've seen that's like rhythmic like this is probably like Baby Driver. But this movie is weird. It's almost like a 2-hour-long song or like a 2-hour-long poem, because I want to say almost every 3 minutes or so, one of the characters on screen will end a sentence with the word Hiroshima, and they'll almost look at the audience when they do it. It feels like theater, it feels like poetry, it feels like a game, it feels utterly bizarre. It feels like they're playing this game, and in the end, you find out that it was kind of a game because there is a shocking twist ending that explains why they're doing it. And it's silly, but anyway, that's about it otherwise. The whole movie is just basically this woman who's working as a nurse in Hiroshima, walking around. You see this incredibly brilliant cinematography of 1960s Hiroshima. That's honestly one of the main reasons I recommend watching this movie, because even though it's black and white, it's completely remarkable seeing the city at the time. Everything is brand new, having just been reconstructed after the bombing. I don't think I've ever seen the Japanese Reconstruction era ever more perfectly captured on film than I have in this movie. Anyway, back to the main character. She spends the entire movie just talking romantically, talking poetically to her Japanese lover, and eventually she starts monologuing again about her bizarre, tragic backstory. Now, since this is a YouTube video, I'm not going to spoil the backstory. It's pretty gritty, but yeah, it's very shocking. Yeah, it's very interesting. And long story short, She lived in Nazi-occupied France. She dealt with Nazis in the only way that she could. Hint, hint. Anyway, Hiroshima Mon Amour was probably one of the most influential films of the French New Wave of the 1960s. I think it's one of those first films that really shows a foreign perspective of Japan, and apparently post-war Japan as it later came to define itself. It goes on to inspire later films like Lost in Translation and other films that just kind of show an outsider's perspective of Japan. Incidentally, apart from apparently influencing the woman called Fujiko Mine, the film does have a few unofficial sequels, but I can't track them down. They're a bit hard to locate. As far as I can tell, there are two of them. In 2001, Japanese director Nobuhiro Suwa created a film called H-Story. This is a docu-fiction about a Japanese team attempting to remake this film, and I'm guessing from the hints in the synopsis, they probably don't succeed. I'd be interested in seeing this since I just saw the original, so yeah, maybe that's cool. Also, apparently in 2003, an Iranian film director made a pseudo-remake called Where or When. Seemingly the same movie, just about the current Iraq war of the time. So yeah, just an update of the film for current geopolitical situations. But yeah, so back to what I was saying in my thesis statement. I've seen Oppenheimer, I've seen Godzilla -1, and now having seen Hiroshima Mon Amour, they flow from each other remarkably well. They make an amazing trilogy. All of them have these common themes of nuclear terror, survivor's guilt, and a personal struggle in the midst of all this. Oppenheimer is about the creation of the bomb. It's the first step. And then it's about the grief America feels about using it. And then we go to Godzilla -1. That's immediately after the bomb's been used, the monster that came out of the bomb, Godzilla. And then the grief of Japan from suffering through all that. And then finally, Hiroshima Mon Amour, the final aftermath of the bomb, the final aftermath of the survivors, and the grief of a French woman trying to survive through the aftermath of all that. All of them are adjacently about the bombing of Hiroshima, and all of them are about the toll that put on the common human psyche across the world. Nuclear bombs are something that really fucked up the human race in the 1950s, and I really hope that we don't suffer through that again, but all these movies tell amazing stories of a single person's experience in both the past, present, and future of the atomic bomb. Anyway, if you have 9 hours to kill, it makes a pretty good playlist if you want to sit pensively and think about the horrors of atomic war. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about that, but it was a pretty goddamn good movie. And when you add it into the flows from Oppenheimer and Godzilla -1, they really, really work together shockingly well. All right, that's all I have to say about this. I doubt I'll be serious again for a long time, but this was a serious review. I'm serious. Good night.